For 10 years my son left me utterly alone after his father died. Not a call, not a visit. Then when my doctors told me I needed life-saving surgery I couldn't afford, I made one last desperate call for his help. He never called me back. He left me to die. Before I begin my story, let me know in the comments where you are listening from and what time it is. I just want to know, I'm not alone in this. And if you feel moved by what you hear, consider subscribing. It helps more people become aware of the reality of elder abuse. Now let me tell you what really happened. My name is Esther Williams, and for 10 years, my world has been framed by the quiet blue glow of a screen. At 73, I have become an unwilling expert in the art of digital spectating. I have watched my son, my only child Jonathan, live a life I am no longer a part of, all through the curated, filtered lens of social media. It is a strange and particularly modern form of torment, to be so close to someone's life, yet so utterly, completely absent from it. It wasn't always like this. For the first year after my beloved husband David passed away, Jonathan was my rock. He called every day, his voice a comforting balm on the raw wound of my grief. He'd bring my granddaughter Chloe over for Sunday dinners, her childish laughter a temporary salve for the crushing silence in my home. I thought, in my naive, heartbroken state, that we would navigate our new reality together, a small, tight-knit family bound by our shared loss. But then Jonathan's career in marketing took off. He married a sharp, ambitious woman named Brenda, who saw my quiet, modest life not as a source of comfort, but as a relic from a past her new husband needed to transcend. And slowly, almost imperceptibly at first, the slow fade began. The weekly Sunday dinners became monthly, then dwindled to perfunctory holiday visits. The daily phone calls became weekly, then monthly, then just stopped. My invitations for coffee, for a simple home-cooked meal, were met with a string of increasingly flimsy excuses. "Oh Mom, we're just swamped this month. Chloe has soccer practice all weekend. Brenda and I have a networking thing we just can't get out of." And so, I learned to watch from a distance. Social media became my only window into their world. I saw Chloe's first day of school, not by holding her hand at the school gates, but through a brightly filtered photo Brenda posted online. I saw them on lavish vacations I didn't know they were taking, skiing in Colorado, sunning themselves in the Caribbean, their teeth white, their smiles wide, a perfect picture of a happy family that did not include me. I saw them at fancy restaurants, at parties, at charity galas. I watched my son's hair begin to gray at the temples, watched my granddaughter grow from a little girl into a young woman, all through the cold, unforgiving glass of my tablet screen. I tried, of course. For years I tried. I'd call, my heart pounding with a desperate hope. The phone would ring and ring, then go to voicemail. "Hello, Jonathan, it's Mom," I'd say, my voice a little too bright, a little too cheerful. "Just calling to say hello, to see how you are." I saw the pictures from Chloe's recital. She looked so beautiful. "I love you." The calls were never returned. I'd send text messages, my old fingers fumbling on the small screen. "Happy anniversary, son. Thinking of you." Sometimes hours later, a single sterile thumbs-up emoji would appear in response. More often there was just silence. The loneliness was a physical thing, a constant dull ache in my chest. My house, once filled with the sounds of David's laughter and a young Jonathan's boisterous energy, was now a silent museum of a life I used to have. The quiet became my companion, my tormentor. My own reflection in the darkened window at night would sometimes startle me, a reminder that I was still here, a ghost haunting the edges of my own family's life. My friends, the few I still had from my days working at the city library, would ask after Jonathan. "How's that successful son of yours, Esther?" I'd lie, of course. A mother's pride is a stubborn, foolish thing. "Oh, he's wonderful. So busy with work, you know how it is. We talk all the time." The lie would taste like ash in my mouth. The worst part was the holidays. On Thanksgiving, I would cook a small chicken for myself, my table set for one, while I knew they were at Brenda's family's lavish feast. On Christmas, I would sit alone watching old movies, while their social media feed would be a joyous explosion of presents and parties. They had not just forgotten me, they had systematically, deliberately, erased me from their lives, their traditions, their hearts. I was a loose thread from their old life, neatly snipped away to not spoil the fabric of their new one. And so 10 years passed. A decade of silence, of unanswered calls, of watching my family from the other side of a screen. The hope I had once clung to, the belief that they would one day remember me, that they would come back, had long since faded, leaving behind only a weary, quiet resignation. I was 73 years old and I was utterly, completely alone. The life I had known was over. I was just waiting. Waiting for my own quiet end, a forgotten footnote in the story of the family I had given everything to create. The first sign that something was truly wrong with my body came as a subtle betrayal. It was a sharp, searing pain in my side that made me gasp and drop a plate while washing the dishes, the porcelain shattering on the linoleum floor. I dismissed it at first, as I had dismissed so many other aches and pains over the past few years. At 73, I had come to believe that a certain level of discomfort was simply the price of living. But this pain was different. It was insistent and it grew worse. Within a few weeks, I was constantly tired, a bone-deep weariness that no amount of rest could cure. I lost my appetite. A persistent, low-grade fever left me feeling weak and disoriented. Finally, at the urging of my old neighbor, who looked at my pale face and shadowed eyes with alarm, I made an appointment with my doctor. The tests that followed were a blur of cold machines, sharp needles, and hushed, serious conversations. The verdict, when it came, was delivered with a gentle, clinical finality that left no room for hope. A rare and aggressive form of kidney disease. My one remaining kidney, the one that had served me faithfully for over 7 decades, was failing, and failing fast. There are treatments, Esther, my doctor, a kind man named Dr. Evans, had explained, his face full of a sympathy I found almost unbearable. Dialysis can manage the symptoms for a time. But for someone of your age and with this specific condition, the only real long-term solution is a transplant. And even then, the surgery is extensive and very risky. Surgery. The word hung in the air, heavy with unspoken costs, with a future I was in no condition to face alone. But the most immediate problem, he explained, was a complication they'd found, an infection that required urgent surgical intervention before they could even consider the long-term options. "We need to schedule you for surgery as soon as possible, Esther," he said gravely. "Next week if we can." "But," he paused, his gaze full of a professional reluctance, "it's a major procedure. The hospital will require a significant upfront deposit to schedule it, a sum I know your basic insurance won't fully cover." The number he quoted made the air leave my lungs. It was a staggering amount, more money than I had seen in one place in my entire life. My small pension, my meager savings, they wouldn't even come close. The house, my only real asset, was paid off, but its equity was not something I could access overnight. I went home in a daze, the doctor's words echoing in my mind. Life-saving surgery, a massive upfront cost, and a profound, terrifying loneliness. For 10 years, I had prided myself on my independence, on never being a burden to my son. I had endured his silence, his abandonment, with a quiet, wounded dignity. But now, my life literally depended on asking for his help. With trembling hands, I dialed his number, the number I hadn't called in over a year, the number that usually went straight to voicemail. This time, after 4 agonizing rings, he answered. "Hello." His voice was impatient, distracted. "Jonathan," I began, my own voice a weak, reedy thing I barely recognized. It's Mom." There was a pause. "Mom? Is everything all right? I'm in the middle of a meeting." The tears I had been holding back began to fall hot and fast. "No, honey," I choked out. "Nothing is all right. I'm sick, Jonathan. Very sick. The doctors, they say I need surgery. An urgent, life-saving surgery. But the hospital, they need a deposit. A lot of money. I don't have it. I don't know what to do." I laid my soul bare, my terror, my vulnerability, my last desperate hope, all there in those few choked words. I waited, my breath held, for his response. For the son I remembered, the one who would have dropped everything, rushed to my side, said, "Don't worry, Mom, we'll figure it out." But that son was long gone. The silence on the other end of the line stretched for an eternity. It was a cold, calculating silence. I could almost hear the gears turning in his head, weighing the cost, the inconvenience, the interruption to his important, busy life. When he finally spoke, his voice was not filled with alarm or compassion. It was flat, distant, devoid of any emotion. "I see," he said, the 2 words a death knell to my hope. "Well, Mom, that's a tough situation. A really tough situation." He took a breath. "Look, I'm really swamped right now. Let me look at my finances, run some numbers. Well, I'll have to call you back. He didn't ask what kind of surgery. He didn't ask how I was feeling. He didn't offer a single word of comfort. He spoke of my life or death crisis as if it were a minor, inconvenient business proposition. Run some numbers. And then he hung up. I sat there, the dial tone buzzing in my ear, a sound that was suddenly the loneliest sound in the world. He wasn't going to call back. I knew it, with a certainty that was as cold and as hard as the surgeon's scalpel that awaited me. He was going to run his numbers, and his 73-year-old mother, his mother who was facing a life-threatening illness, was going to come up short. The abandonment was now complete. He had not just forgotten me in his life. He was now prepared to forget me in my death. The silence that followed his call was not just the absence of his voice. It was the absence of all hope. My son had just, in the coldest, most final way possible, left me to die. The silence from Jonathan's end stretched from hours into a full day, then 2. The silence was his answer, a response more cruel and definitive than any angry words could have been. He had run his numbers, and his dying mother was not a worthwhile investment. The realization didn't bring more tears. I felt as if I had no more tears to shed. It brought a strange, almost terrifying clarity, the kind that comes when you are facing your own mortality and have absolutely nothing left to lose. I was going to die. Perhaps not from the kidney disease itself, but from the lack of a simple deposit that stood between me and the surgery I so desperately needed. And my only son, the man I had dedicated my life to, was going to let it happen. In my small hospital room, where I'd been admitted for observation while the administrative wheels turned, I lay staring at the acoustic tile ceiling. The thought of my ungrateful son inheriting my only real asset, my modest but paid-off house on Sycamore Street, filled me with a sudden, hot and surprisingly potent rage. He would let me die for lack of money, and then he would waltz in, sell my home, and use the proceeds to fund his next lavish vacation with his perfect, heartless family. He would stand at my graveside, perform a show of grief for his friends, and then quietly profit from my demise. No, absolutely not. My legacy, the small sum total of my quiet, hard-working life, would not be a reward for his monstrous indifference. If I was going to die, I would do so on my own terms, with my affairs in order, my final act a testament not to his greed, but to my own values. With a surge of adrenaline-fueled strength I didn't know I possessed, I reached for the phone by my hospital bed. I called the one man I knew I could trust, the man who had been my late husband David's closest friend and most trusted advisor. His lawyer, Mr. Elias Thorne. Elias, now in his late 70s but still sharp as a tack, answered on the second ring. His voice, when he heard it was me, was full of a warm, genuine concern that felt like a balm on my wounded soul. "Esther, my dear, I heard you were in the hospital. I was about to call. Are you all right?" "No, Elias," I said, my voice quiet but firm. "I am not all right, and I need your help. I need to draft a new will. Immediately." There was a pause on the other end of the line. Elias, a man of immense discretion, did not pry. "Of course, Esther," he said simply. "Whenever you are ready. I can come to the hospital this afternoon." He arrived a few hours later, his familiar, kind face a welcome sight in the sterile hospital room. He brought a thermos of my favorite tea and a compassionate listening ear. I told him everything. The 10 years of silence from Jonathan. My sudden, terrifying diagnosis. The urgent need for surgery, the impossible upfront cost. And then the hardest part, my final, desperate plea to my son, and the cold, calculating silence that had been his only reply. Elias listened, his expression shifting from concerned sympathy to a quiet, righteous anger. "That ungrateful boy," he murmured, shaking his head. "After everything you and David did for him. I am so sorry, Esther. So deeply sorry." "I am past sorry, Elias," I said, my voice devoid of self-pity. "I am now at the stage of practicalities. I want to change my will. I do not have much, as you know. Just the house. But it will not go to him. I want it to go to my niece, my sister's girl, the one who still calls me every holiday. Jonathan is to have nothing." "It shall be done, Esther," he said, taking out a notepad. "We can draft a simple codicil right now." He paused, his brow furrowing in thought. "To make sure everything is in order, to ensure this new will is unassailable, I'll need to do a full review of your and David's assets. Did he have any other papers, old files, things that might have been put away and forgotten?" Sometimes there are small, overlooked insurance policies, old bonds. My mind, foggy with pain and medication, struggled to focus. Then a memory surfaced, dim and dusty. The briefcase, I whispered. David's old leather briefcase. The one from his father. He always kept his most important papers in it. It's in the attic, I think. In the back of the cedar chest. I haven't looked in it since he passed. I assumed it was just old tax documents, things you had already handled for the estate. Elias's eyes lit up with a flicker of professional interest. A briefcase, you say? In the attic. He patted my hand. Don't you worry about a thing, Esther. I have a key to your house, the one you gave me after David's passing, for emergencies. I will go there myself this evening and retrieve it. We will leave no stone unturned. I felt a wave of relief. The matter was in his capable hands. We spent the next hour drafting the new will, my voice growing stronger as I dictated my final wishes. A small act of reclamation, of taking back control of my own legacy. After Elias left, a strange sense of peace settled over me. I had done what I could. I had protected my home from my son's greed. The rest was in God's hands. I didn't expect to hear from Elias again until the next day. But my hospital phone rang just before 10 o'clock that night. It was him. His voice was different. The somber calm was gone, replaced by an energy so excited, so full of disbelief, it was almost electric. Esther, he said, his voice cracking with an emotion I couldn't quite place. Are you sitting down? Well, of course you are. I'm in your attic. I found the briefcase. And? I asked, my heart beginning to pound. Was it just old tax forms? I heard him let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. No, Esther, he said, his voice now a reverent whisper. It wasn't tax forms. Oh, my dear, dear woman. David, that brilliant, secretive, wonderful man. He never told you, did he? Told me what, Elias? I asked, my confusion growing. What did you find? Your future, Esther, he said, his voice thick with wonder. I found your future. David didn't just leave you a house. He left you a second legacy. A secret one. And it's about to change everything. A second legacy? I repeated into the phone, my voice a faint, bewildered echo. Elias, what on earth are you talking about? David and I, we lived a simple life. There were no secrets, no hidden fortunes. Just our pensions, the house, and the small savings I've already depleted. I could hear the rustle of papers on the other end of the line, then Elias's voice, thick with an emotion I could only describe as joyful disbelief. Simple, yes, Esther. That's what David wanted everyone to think. It's what he wanted you to think, so you would never worry. But that man, he was not just a good husband, he was a quiet genius. This briefcase, it's not full of old tax documents. It's full of miracles. He began to describe the contents of the dusty leather briefcase he'd found in my attic. My mind struggled to keep up, to process the sheer impossibility of what he was saying. It wasn't just a few forgotten savings bonds. It was a meticulously curated secret investment portfolio David had started in the early 1990s, a time when personal computing was just beginning to explode. He was fascinated by technology, remember? Elias said, his voice full of a rediscovered awe for his old friend. He saw the future coming. While other men were buying stocks in big oil and automobiles, David was putting small, almost trivial amounts of money into tiny, unheard-of tech companies. Companies he believed would change the world. He started listing the names that meant nothing to me at first. Then he mentioned one. A small software company he'd bought a few thousand shares in for pennies apiece, simply because he admired the passion of its young, nerdy founder. That company was now a global behemoth, a household name synonymous with the very technology we were using to speak to each other. Esther, Elias said, his voice cracking slightly, those shares he bought for less than the price of a used car? They're now worth. I can't even calculate it fully without my team, but it's in the millions. Several millions. I sank back against my hospital pillows, my head spinning. Millions? It was impossible. It was a dream. And that's not all, he continued, his excitement palpable. There are bearer bonds in here from before you were married, that have been maturing for 50 years untouched. And deeds. Deeds to 2 small commercial properties in the old warehouse district that he must have bought as a young man and forgotten about. A district that is now the city's trendiest, most expensive real estate market. He let out a low whistle. Esther, You are not a woman of modest means. You are, and have been for some time, an exceptionally wealthy woman. You just never knew it. A wave of dizziness washed over me, a feeling so profound it momentarily eclipsed the pain from my illness. Wealthy. Me. The woman who had been lying in this hospital bed, terrified of a surgery deposit. The woman whose own son had dismissed her plea for help because he had to run the numbers. The irony was so staggering, so immense it was almost comical. But, why Elias? I whispered, my mind reeling. Why didn't he ever tell me? I can only guess, he said softly. Knowing David, it wasn't about keeping secrets from you. It was about protecting you. This was his, in case of emergency, break glass fund. His final, ultimate gift. He built this silent fortune so that you, in your old age, would never, ever have to worry, would never have to be dependent on anyone, not even your own children. Perhaps he saw the man Jonathan was becoming long before you were willing to. And he built you a fortress, my dear. A financial fortress. Tears began to stream down my face, not of sorrow this time, but of a profound, overwhelming gratitude for the man I had loved and lost. My David. My quiet, brilliant, far-seeing David. He had reached out from beyond the grave, from a dusty old briefcase in a forgotten attic, and had just saved my life. The implications of this discovery were seismic. The surgery I so desperately needed, the one with the impossible upfront cost, it was no longer an obstacle. The best doctors, the best care, a private room away from the noisy chaos of the ward, they were all now within my reach. My future, which had seemed so bleak, so circumscribed by illness and my son's cruel indifference, had just cracked wide open, revealing a landscape of possibility I couldn't have imagined in my wildest dreams. Elias, I said, my voice thick with unshed tears and a new steely resolve. I want you to handle everything. I want the best surgeon you can find. I want a private suite for my recovery. Spare no expense. And, I paused, the cold fury from the previous days returning, now fused with an incredible, undeniable power. I want you to proceed with the changes to my will. With one small addition. Anything, Esther. The house on Sycamore Street, I said, my voice now as clear and as cold as a diamond. The one my son is so patiently waiting for me to vacate. I want it left not to my niece but to be held in trust. A trust whose sole purpose will be to house the law firm you will help me establish pro bono, to fight cases of financial elder abuse. We will call it, the David Williams Foundation for Dignity. There was a stunned, then deeply admiring silence on the other end of the line. And my son Jonathan? Elias asked gently. Jonathan, I said, a slow, dangerous smile spreading across my face, will inherit exactly what he offered me in my time of need. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. I hung up the phone, my heart pounding not with fear but with a thrilling, terrifying sense of power. The world had just been handed back to me on a silver platter, a final gift from my beloved husband. And I was about to use it to ensure that no other son, no other family, would ever be able to do to their mother what mine had so callously, so foolishly tried to do to me. The game had changed, and I was now holding all the cards. The discovery of David's secret legacy was a powerful medicine, a jolt of life more potent than any foredrip. The very next morning, Elias Thorne, my dear husband's friend and now my formidable legal champion, set the wheels of my new reality in motion. By noon, the hospital administration had received confirmation of my newfound ability to cover any and all expenses. The change in my treatment was immediate and almost comically swift. I was moved from the noisy, crowded general ward to a private suite on the top floor, a room with a panoramic view of the city, a comfortable sofa for visitors, and a silence so profound it felt like a luxury. The best surgeon in the state, a renowned specialist who was famously difficult to book, was suddenly available to perform my surgery the following week. My diet was no longer the lukewarm, bland fare of the hospital cafeteria, but delicious, nourishing meals ordered from a special menu. I was no longer a charity case waiting for a financial verdict from my indifferent son. I was Mrs. Esther Williams, a patient of significant means, a woman to be taken very seriously. The surgery was a success. The recovery was arduous, as Dr. Evans had warned, but it was a journey I now faced not with terror, but with a quiet, determined focus. My private suite became my command center. Elias visited daily, bringing not just legal documents but my favorite books, good coffee, and his warm, steadfast friendship. We spoke of David, of old times, and of the future of the David Williams Foundation for Dignity. The news of my miraculous change in circumstances, of course, did not go unnoticed. A nurse, one who had seen me in my initial desperate state, whispered to another, "Did you hear about the old woman in 8B? The one whose son wouldn't help her? Turns out she's a secret millionaire." Word travels fast in a hospital. It traveled, inevitably, to Jonathan. He called my new private room phone about a week after my successful surgery. I had been dreading this call, but now I felt nothing but a cool, detached curiosity. "Mom." His voice was hesitant, uncertain, a stark contrast to his usual arrogant impatience. I heard you had the surgery. I'm so glad you're okay." "I am, Jonathan," I replied, my voice calm. "No thanks to you. Mom, I was going to call back," he stammered, the lie so clumsy, so transparent, it was almost pitiful. "I was just running the numbers, like I said. Things were tight. But I was going to figure something out." "Were you?" I asked, my voice holding a note of icy amusement. "Well, you needn't have worried. It seems your father, my late husband, had already run the numbers for me many years ago. My affairs are quite well taken care of." There was a stunned silence. What do you mean, Mom? Dad's pension? That wouldn't have been enough for this kind of care." "No, it wouldn't have," I agreed. "This is something else entirely. Something your father, a man of great wisdom and foresight, put away for me for a day just like this one. A day when his wife might find herself in need, and his son might find himself, otherwise, engaged." I could hear the frantic gears turning in his head, the dawning, horrified comprehension. His mother, the woman he had so readily dismissed, the woman whose life he had deemed not worth a financial risk, was not the penniless, dependent old woman he had assumed. I don't understand," he whispered. "No, Jonathan," I said softly. "You don't. And I suspect you never will. Now, if you'll excuse me, my physical therapist is here. I have a long recovery ahead of me and a great deal of work to do." I hung up the phone, a small, satisfying smile on my lips. My recovery was fueled by my new sense of purpose. I threw myself into the planning for the foundation. Elias and I worked with a team of his best lawyers to establish the charity, to define its mission, to provide legal aid and financial support for elderly individuals facing neglect, abuse, and financial exploitation. My story, my pain, would be transformed into a force for good, a shield for others who were not as fortunate as I had been to have a secret legacy waiting in a dusty briefcase. As I regained my strength, I also discovered the simple joys my newfound wealth could afford. I bought myself a new wardrobe of elegant, comfortable clothes. I hired a private chef to prepare delicious, healthy meals to help me recuperate. I made plans for a trip, a real one, to see the Italian countryside I had always dreamed of as soon as I was well enough to travel. My life, which had been shrinking, was now expanding in ways I had never thought possible. The loneliness that had been my constant companion was replaced by a sense of mission, of connection to a cause greater than myself. The fear of a destitute future was gone, replaced by the quiet, powerful hum of my own agency. I was no longer just Esther Williams, the forgotten mother, the grieving widow. I was Esther Williams, the philanthropist, the survivor, the founder. I was a woman who had faced death, betrayal, and abandonment, and had emerged on the other side not just intact but reborn. The pain of my son's betrayal was still there, a deep, indelible scar on my heart. But it no longer defined me. My new life, my new purpose, the legacy I was now building in my beloved David's name, that was what defined me now. My son had left me to die. But my husband and my own resilient spirit had given me a reason to live more fully, more powerfully than ever before. My recovery was a quiet, steady process of rebuilding, not just my physical strength but my very soul. The luxury of my private hospital suite gave way to the comfort of my own home, now staffed with a kind, professional daytime nurse and a wonderful cook who filled my small house with the aromas of healthy, delicious food. I had never known such ease, such freedom from worry. The David Williams Foundation for Dignity was now a legally established entity, its board of directors comprised of myself, Elias Thorne, and a few other trusted, respected community leaders. We were already reviewing our first cases, offering hope and legal aid to other elders who had been wronged. My life had found a new, profound meaning. Of my son Jonathan, I heard nothing for several weeks after our last terse phone call. I knew through the quiet channels of family gossip relayed by my sister that he was in a state of frantic, bewildered panic. He had tried to get information from Elias Thorne's office about my newfound assets, but was met with a polite, impenetrable legal wall. He had tried to visit me at the hospital, only to be told that Mrs. Williams was not accepting visitors who were not on her pre-approved list. He was locked out not just of my house but of my life, and he didn't understand why. He finally appeared on my doorstep one sunny afternoon, about a month after I had returned home. He didn't use his old key. I had changed the locks. He had to ring the doorbell like any other guest. I had my new nurse, a lovely woman named Sarah, answer the door. I watched from my armchair as she politely but firmly informed him that Mrs. Williams was resting and had left strict instructions not to be disturbed. His face, visible through the living room window, was a mask of disbelief and sputtering rage. The master of his own universe was being denied entry to his mother's humble home. His next move was a formal lawyer-penned letter, delivered by courier. It was a masterpiece of manipulative, self-serving prose, speaking of his deep concern for my sudden and dramatic change in circumstances, his filial duty to ensure his mother was not being taken advantage of by new influences, a clear reference to Elias and my new team, and his legal right as my sole heir to be privy to my financial affairs. I laughed, a real, genuine laugh for the first time in what felt like an eternity. My heir? The boy had some nerve. I handed the letter to my own lawyer. Elias's response was swift and brutal. It informed Jonathan's counsel that I, Esther Williams, was of perfectly sound mind, that my financial affairs were my own private business, and that my status as his mother did not give him any legal right to my assets while I was still alive. As for his status as my sole heir, Elias coolly suggested that Mr. Williams might be operating under some outdated assumptions. That was the final catalyst. That was what brought him back to my door, this time with his wife Brenda in tow, both of them dressed in somber funereal clothes, their faces arranged in masks of deep rehearsed sorrow. They came, they said, to offer a formal, heartfelt apology. I agreed to see them just once in my living room with my nurse present as a silent witness. They sat on the edge of my sofa, a picture of penitent children. They apologized for their neglect, for their thoughtlessness during my initial diagnosis, for not calling back. They blamed the stress of their own lives, their ignorance of my true condition. It was a polished, convincing performance. I listened patiently until they were done. And I asked quietly. Jonathan looked confused. And we hope you can find it in your heart to forgive us, Mom. We want to be a family again. We want to help you manage things, to be there for you. There was the real reason for this performance. They had found out about my wealth and they wanted back in. They wanted their inheritance. I looked at them, my son and his wife, these two strangers who had so casually left me to face death alone because they had to run some numbers. And I felt nothing but a profound, weary pity. Jonathan, I said, my voice calm, your apology has come far too late. It is not my forgiveness you seek. It is my fortune. And you will have neither. I gestured to my nurse, who handed him a single sealed envelope. This is for you, I said. My final word on the matter. He opened it, his hands trembling slightly. Inside was a certified copy of my new will. His eyes scanned the page, his face growing paler with each line he read. The bequest to the David Williams Foundation. The small, thoughtful gifts to my friends, my niece. And then the final clause. To my son Jonathan David Williams, I bequeath the sum of $1, in final recognition of the value he placed upon my life during my time of greatest need. He looked up at me, his face a mask of utter, horrified disbelief. $1, he whispered. After everything? This is a joke. No, Jonathan, I said, my voice as soft and as unyielding as granite. This is not a joke. This is a consequence. This is the final accounting of a lifetime of your choices. You had a mother's unconditional love, and you had the promise of a substantial inheritance. You valued neither. You left me alone to face my own mortality. So now, I will leave you alone to face your own future, a future you must build for yourself without the benefit of my life's savings. I stood then, my body still frail but my spirit unshakable. You will not contest this will, I said, my voice clear and strong, because my lawyer has a file, a very thick file, detailing your neglect, your demands, your utter indifference to my potential death. And if you dare to challenge my final wishes, that file will be made public. Your brand, as I believe your wife calls it, would likely not survive the revelation. They stared at me, defeated, their greed finally, utterly checkmated. They had nothing left to say. They left my house that day not as worried children, but as disinherited heirs, their future of easy wealth turned to dust by their own monstrous actions. I watched them go, two small, grasping figures retreating from a life they could have had. I felt a pang of sadness, the residual ache of a mother's love. But it was quickly replaced by a quiet, profound peace. My life was my own. My legacy was one of kindness, of justice, of honoring the good man my husband had been. My son had demanded I run the numbers. I had. And in my final, irrefutable calculation he had been found wanting. My final lesson, the one I had never wanted to teach, had been delivered.